You're listening to Parasearch Radio, news, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio. Parasearch Radio, broadcasting to the UK and beyond.
The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised. You're listening to Kerry Greenaway and Mark Manley on the Dark Mirror Paranormal Show, only on Parasearch Radio.
Good evening and welcome to the Dark Mirror Paranormal Show. My name is Kerry Greenaway, and as always on a Friday, I am joined by lovely Mark. Good evening, Mark.
Hello. How are you?
Hey, Mr. Carl Hutchinson, how are you?
I'm good. Nice to be speaking to you on a Friday again.
Exactly.
Yes, definitely on a Friday. Yes.
So, my beautiful men, what are we talking about tonight?
Wow, we've got an interesting one tonight.
Interdimensions and parallel universes.
I love the way he always goes into Dr. Evil when we do topics like this.
Well, Dr. Evil.
So this isn't the same as what we talked. We talked about portals the other week, didn't we? And we looked at.
We covered. We covered portals, which are doorways to the dimensions. So this one tonight is about the dimensions and some of the alleged stories, factual stories that are supposed to have happened. I could not find anywhere the story about the guy who was doing plumbing in his kitchen, went into his cupboard and came out in the future and spoke to his future self. I couldn't find that anywhere. Either that or it's turned into a video game called Mario Brothers. I'm not sure.
Possibly. It does sound like that, doesn't it? But we did find some bizarre stories before when we did I think time slips. I think we sort of covered that on.
Yeah, it's kind of the same as time slips, but these are more in depth and a little bit more. How do I describe it? A bit more jazzy, a bit more upbeat, and a bit more weird.
Like that?
Hey.
I think the difference is with a time slip, it's inadvertently done. You don't. It's not. It just happens, doesn't it? Like the ladies at Versailles. It just sort of happened to them. Whereas what we're sort of looking at is the deliberate intention to cross those boundaries, those dimensions. Yeah. Is that the difference?
Yeah, because there's reports of people actually physically using these to enter a different time period or enter a different zone or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, they're using it as a kind of an in and out of popping in, popping out.
I normally have that problem in the morning. Time slips are, I believe, very different to parallel universes because time slips are staying in your own universe, your own dimension, but popping backwards and forwards. Parallel universes are mirror universes, but there'd be like a male Kerry, a female me, a female Carl, something like that. Or for every single life choice you have, there's, it branches off into two things. You either did that or you either did that. The one we're in now is all the choices we've done. And then you've got all the different dimensions which have all the other choices that we made.
So
and, hence the onion theory.
What I'm saying is it's like the script of Sliding Doors.
Mm.
Basically.
If you've ever seen that film, Mark.
I've got no idea what you're talking about, but I'm going to agree with you.
Basically, it's the theory of sliding doors is a person goes to get on a tube train, and instead of getting on the tube train, he lets somebody goes on, and basically it looks at the results of him not getting on the tube train, what happens, and also then looks at what happens when he does, and then it sort of meets at a point where both areas converge.
So are we talking? That's very linear, though, isn't it? That it sounds to me very linear. It's like time is moving in a specific, like the Clockwork Universe is moving in a straight line, whereas
in our universe, yes. In our universe, yes. But if you imagine it as an onion,
like a long a bit of spaghetti. And you put it straight, and then the other time you throw on it, and it's sort of zigzagging, but it interacts with our timeline. And these are the points where you can come in and out.
Okay.
Sort of, yeah.
So the portals are where we would go in and out.
The portals are the doorways to these other dimensions.
Whereas the dimensions are there existing in their own right.
Right. Running wherever they are.
However they are.
So, and if you look at certain scientific reports, they reckon that some of the parallel dimensions are so close to us, it's like half an atom's width away from where we are now, but we just can't touch it.
Yeah.
But there is we'll get to it at the end of the show. I did put in a report that I found about a certain scientist who thinks they have found a way to open up a doorway. So they're going to try and do that in CERN, of all places.
Ooh, CERN. A friend of mine has been at CERN this week. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Proper getting his physics geek on.
And how many of him came back? Was it one or was there a few?
No, he's come back complete and whole.
Okay, so he didn't have his testicles growing on his head or anything?
No, he seems all fine.
That's very cool then.
It's very cool. It's massive, CERN. Anyway, off topic already. So, parallel universes. Where do we start with this? Because we can't. These are all theories, aren't they?
Yeah. Nothing. As everything that we discuss are theories. There's no
definitive proof.
No definitive. But there is more factual. There's more information behind parallel universes that potentially would make them more realistic to actually be existing than there is against them existing, if that makes sense.
I was just thinking about the onion theory, and that for every single thing possible, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Like there's a universe where the dinosaurs didn't die out and they evolved. There's a universe, and this is the one that makes me crack up. Is the fact that there's right at this very second in time, there's a universe somewhere with male Kerry, female Carl, female me having the same conversation, doing the same show.
So there must be a parallel universe that actually Brexit happened.
Ooh,
That's a point. That's spaced out, wouldn't it?
There's one where the Germans won the war.
How useful would it be then if you could just pop along the parallel dimensions, see how that worked out? It's not working out so good, so over here, we'll choose to stay in.
But then you come into the whole thing about if you're in there and you cause a change to that reality, what sort of effect that?
Oh, that's boring.
Actually,
like
that's on the
Sometimes you've got to put it in the muck it bucket. I said muck it, and just go for it, I suppose.
That's on the timeline, your own timeline in your own dimension doing that. Would that count in a different dimension which has a totally different timeline?
If you're interfering with your own timeline...
With your own timeline, yes, it would.
Comes in from another thing and interferes with your timeline.
But it wouldn't interfere with their own one, would it?
No, it wouldn't interfere with the own one, but it would affect the timeline they're in. If they suddenly dragged Hitler back into our current timeline, that would affect it because it was standing there giving it the old...
Well, to be honest, that would explain a lot of people's in-laws, but,
Possibly.
I tell you what, if there was a box invented, like there is in one of the Terry Pratchett books about sliding left and right, if there was a box invented, I would.
Isn't that Tinder?
No, we know a person on Tinder, don't we? Anyway,
I'm not.
With their Grindr. No, we know a person on Tinder who has a Grindr profile picture. Anyway, what was I going to say? Yeah, if I had that, you know who he knows who I'm talking about. Kerry's going, what? Hey, if you could have that box and go into a different parallel universe, I would have so much fun. But where you could come back to your own, so it hasn't affected your own timeline. But you could go back into other. You could go into different parallel universes. What fun could you have?
Yeah.
Or right, so you go over to your.
Pressure.
So I'm like right. So you go over to your parallel universe. You interfere with it. Would that then create another parallel universe?
Yeah.
Or there's potential.
Yes, because the one that you're in,
there's already one created where you've gone in to change that timeline. So potentially, like you said, it's the onion. You keep peeling back the layers, and there's different layers of the onion.
Oh, I'm very confused.
Infinitesimal.
I have to say,
Infinitesimal.
These concepts kind of turn my brain to mush.
But I thought that was the years of drugs and stuff that did that anyway.
Well, yeah, maybe a little bit, but no. Generally, though, these concepts, they're so huge, aren't they?
Yeah.
I can get some of the concepts, but
to get your head around it fully, and then to explain all those possibilities, to me, it doesn't seem.
Yes, take a longer show than an hour to do it.
Pardon?
It takes a longer show than an hour to explain it.
Well, just because we're going to just.
The easiest way to look at it. The easiest way to look at it is imagine you've got a map, but on that map is only one road, and that's all you can see is this one line, and then you got to that, and it's like, I'm going to have a cup of tea, yes or no? Yes. And then you've got the no one as well. So if you said yes, it goes off that way, and then you'll have more choices and more roads that open up. Or you could have gone to no and went that way, and then you have lots of different choices on that way, and all those open up. And for each different road that opens up,
it's bigger
that is a
than
new
that, though.
universe.
It's not about our individual choice, is it? If there are parallel dimensions, they could be completely different from what we are living today. They could be working on a whole different energy level. Their whole physics, their whole worlds are totally different. We may not even be in there. That we may not even be part of the equation.
Nope.
Well, no, because if dinosaurs evolved,
everything is a possibility of a different reality, a different path that line is treading on. So,
and if dinosaurs evolved, they would have Carver saying things about them being Tyrannosaurus Rexes. Yeah.
Exactly. So potentially most of the stuff that we discussed on the Dark Mirror show could actually be happening. So we could have the Rastafarian aliens sitting on the moon watching the moon.
Well, I think that's actually possible in this dimension, to be fair, but there you go. Because it just sounds so awesome.
Being alien trash.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. That kind of doesn't sing to my soul, but the Rastafarian aliens watching the moon landing kind of does. That's how wild it got on that particular show. So
everything we discussed on the show exists, could be real. And that's the thing I like about it, is it...
Okay. So, are you there?
Yeah.
Have I lost you?
Yes, we're here.
Oh, sorry, I thought I'd lost you for a split second there. Right, let's have a little look then. Now, we did talk about portals, right, but there is one, and I know you want to do a bigger show on this particular topic, because it is quite a big one, this one. But
that's why I put it on there, because I thought it'd taste her.
Well, you bought in the Skinwalker Ranch. Now, I don't know anything about the Skinwalker Ranch. It's not anything I've looked into. In my head, I'm kind of just seeing aliens, remote ranch, regular visits, man making a fortune.
No, you heard Skinwalker Ranch and you imagined Luke Skywalker with no clothes on running around with his lightsaber in his hand, didn't you? We know you did.
So talk to me about Skinwalker Ranch, because you two know about this more than I do.
I think Carl knows more about it than I do. Do you want to do the honours, Carl? I can tell you
I'll leave you and I'll just chip in. I'll leave it to you and I'll just chip in.
basically, the Skinwalker Ranch has been reported for years. It was on, well, it is technically still on Native American sacred land. Then it was, you know, when we came over, they went, you know what, you're not having your land, bang, smack, we're taking it from you. But for years and eons, there's been reports of, you name it, in the paranormal world or unexplained world, and it's been there. It's been cited, reported on at the Skinwalker Ranch, and it's credible sightings as well. It's not just, yo, Jim Bob who got struck by lightning 12 dozen million times, and like he sucked a lollipop and he saw a yowie come take it out of his mouth. It's not something like that. It's been UFOs, ghosts, man beasts. Even Carl, there has been there's been Bigfoot, there's been orbs, there's been marsh gas, you name it, it's been sighted. Werewolves, lycanthropy, the lot.
Yeah, it's a place where they think that, as we were trying to say about this portal thing, that possibly things come in and out, quite a lot to produce the phenomena that's been reported there. But as Mark said, there's a lot of it that has been. There's a lot of cases, but it's also documented cases where people in law enforcement, the military, have basically said they've seen and documented it and said they've seen the different coloured skies, strange creatures, light anomalies, as Mark was saying, like Bigfoot, every possible thing you can think of in the paranormal world, from crypto,
including pterodactyls,
to ghosts, to you name it, they have it, or that it's been reported.
My own theory about that place, and I'm wondering if Carl would probably agree with me on this one. I think that because there is an infinitesimal amount of dimensions, there may be certain places or certain doorways where lots of those dimensions converge, and you can open a doorway and it's take your pick as to which one it goes into. So if you've got somewhere like that where you've got so much activity going on, why couldn't it be that it's just because you've got that one doorway there, and you've got all these different places that can come into that one doorway? Because like I said, I mean, there's even been pterodactyls apparently sighted there as well. So,
blimey.
You know.
I sort of, on a layman's terms, and a little bit of which I've kind of mentioned last week when we were talking about the subject we were talking about last week, where I mentioned, because I do a lot of mine about pop culture and about a lot of my... I like try and relate it back to films, etc., because I like slightly.
Yeah.
But there's the famous film where the guy plays the music and he goes back and he goes into another dimension where there's all sorts there. There's dinosaurs. There's cavemen. There's all sorts of weird and wonderful.
Wasn't that a series?
No, it was a film with the guy out of. Cable Guy, not Cable Guy.
No, I know what you mean. The Step Brothers, both of them were in it.
The guy that was basically Anchorman.
Yeah, him. Yeah, I've seen it. It's a good film.
Yeah, and basically he had the idea in the film. He had this idea that you can open a doorway if you have a certain resonance, and it just happened to be a crazy song that was played on a cassette player. Open a doorway and things would just disappear and appear back in there. So there'd be like half an ice cream van because half of it went through, and it all came out of like a fun, like an amusement park where they went on I think the Tunnel of Love, and then they went in and out. But there was like all these things. So I sort of relate Skinwalker Ranch to a kind of that movie, because these things are happening so often. All these weird and wonderful phenomena that people are reporting to see, like as you said, pterodactyls, ghosts.
Are we getting? Sorry to interrupt, but is that just what they say, or is this documented?
Oh yeah, as we said, there's documented.
It is documented.
Law enforcement, all sorts of people that have actually seen this phenomena. It's not just like one case, not like Mark was saying, not some crackpot in the hills, some hillbilly having a sniff on the old moonshine. We're talking people who, like I said, law enforcement, police people have reported these strange sightings and these strange phenomena all happening in this same area.
Exactly. There's one guy who I'm sure he gave up his job as a sheriff, and he turned into a paranormal investigator, and he spends literally most of his time at... Steady there, girl. Spent most of his time at the Skinwalker Ranch investigating everything that's happened there, because he gets so many people call him in and say, can you investigate this, can you investigate that, such and such has gone missing. Even cattle mutilations that have been going on up there as well. Literally anything that happens in the paranormal world, you name it, it's happened there.
So they think that there's this crossover between worlds or varying dimensions that converge at this point in the geographical location.
That's one of my own personal theories about it, but I personally don't see why it wouldn't, because it makes sense logically if you think about it. When you've got all these wonderful and varied sightings of kind of different stuff that you're not going to see unless you're taking certain psychotropic drugs. If all that's happening in the one place, it must be a doorway. It's opening up to lots of different places.
Okay, so we're going to go into that in a lot more depth in another show, aren't we? The Skinwalker Ranch. That is something that you guys wanted to look deeper into, isn't it?
Yes.
On that one. So what else? Where else? Is that the only place on the planet that has this kind of phenomenon? Phenomenon. No. There's loads of places. Phenomenal. There's lots of places all over the world. What about China's Phantasm City? Ooh.
Did you read that? China's Phantasm City. Oh, by the way, it was Will Ferrell was that guy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think the name of the film, but it was definitely Will Ferrell. Well, basically, early part of this decade, China had a serious spate of rather strange sightings involving cities that seemed to float above people in the sky. Now, there's been a few of those recently as well, but I think they were put down to some weird weather phenomena that made a reflection. But the floating cities looked nothing like the cities where they were spotted, though. And they had details that included towers, windows, and even signs. And the strange phantom cities appeared like years apart, often on cloudy days, over rivers nearby. And that's one of the things I know has happened recently, is it's been a certain cloud level above a body of water, and something's been reflected from miles away, hit the water and bounced up and been like a projector. Next to the cloud.
Exactly the same when there's sightings of these mysterious ghost ships that seem to float above the ocean. When it's just an optical illusion with the bounce, the way the light refracts, to make it look, when these pictures, like these boats actually floating above the ocean when it's actually on the ocean.
That's right.
The light reacts.
They have a special name for it as well, and it sounds like it's just come out of an Arthurian legend. Fata Morgana.
Wasn't she in Robin Hood?
Morgana was the one that
King Arthur's sister.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and she was the nasty one, wasn't she?
Well, she wasn't originally. She was a healer. No, she lived on an island with, in the middle of a lake, with several other women, and they were they were viewed as like goddesses, healers, master healers. And it's only history's rewritten it. They've written her as a bad character and not, but she actually healed Arthur, sent him on his way, and then he went back to her to die, as part of the legend says. As part of the legend
were they
says.
something to do? Were they something to do with the ladies of the lake?
I don't know quite how that turns out. I'm not that au fait with it, but I do know that bit about Morgana. And it is more about history rewriting the importance of the role of women and demonising women over history.
History tends to do that a lot to women, doesn't it? Like the first vampire.
That's because we are the goddesses, and you men need to be worshipping at our feet. And you didn't want to do that, so you rewrote history and demonised us women, and we're poor, put down women.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mistress Kerry is available for birthdays and bar mitzvahs.
Oh, dearie me.
Well, Lilith, the first vampire. Lilith, the first vampire.
Yeah. The first wife of Adam, even.
Yep. And she was demonised because she refused to bow down to a conquering king. And she chucked herself out of a window instead of letting him have his wicked way and kill her. So they went, stuff you, because the people loved her, and rewrote it as she was horrible and devil worshipped and everything. And thus, hence, became the first vampire. So I wonder what they're going to do about Kerry over the years, or about us on the Dark Mirror show. I wonder what we'll turn into in about 200 years' time. What will we be?
Forgotten,
Well,
think.
They'll put Kerry. They will put Kerry. I'm telling you now. No, we won't be forgotten. Not with my God. They will put Kerry alongside American Horror Story, and they'll put the two together, come out with 20, and say, "Yeah, that was her."
And Carl, what would they make of our lovely Carl? Because you've got me all put down in history books as some evil thing.
I think Carl and myself, judging by all the gear he's wearing and the way we talk and stuff, we would be like the two brothers on Supernatural, but we'd be Supernatural that's built for comfort and not for speed. So we'd be in a Winnebago, not in that car, going around helping people.
You gotta love his imagination, Carl, ain't you?
Yeah, I must admit, and I'm sober. This is some weird shit.
Hello, I've read every single Discworld novel. I have to have a very imagination.
So have I.
Captain
My brain's not like that.
Yeah.
How long have you known me?
I know, right? Anyway, so that's... Right, I read a story about a World War II battleship that actually witnessed this sort of thing too, and there was in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, not near land anywhere, and the same thing, that there was a city floating in the sky, looked like nothing else I'd ever seen, in fact looked dated with white, like Grecian buildings and stuff like that, and people were waving at them from these cities. So it's almost like they could see the people on the ship and the ship could see that. And apparently, I think, if I remember rightly, it's a long time ago I read this, it lasted about 48 hours.
Yeah, that's right. And there was also a similar event. There was also something else that happened with a rather famous US Navy ship, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, that was, as we were saying, everything, this is one of the phenomena where there is a lot of factual evidence written down, and there is a lot of eyewitness accounts. And you've got a ship full. I would say a ship full of seamen, but that might be taken the wrong way. So I will say there's a ship full of sailors. There's a ship full of sailors that can, turn around and say, yeah, actually, we saw this. And as far as I'm aware, most of them were interviewed, and most of them did turn around and say, actually, there was. But it was. They said that the garb that these people were wearing, they didn't recognise, and they were very dark-skinned.
Yeah, I've sort of read obviously the one we're going to talk about, and obviously I've read about this British ship, and yeah, it was for a long period of time. They kept on seeing this floating city, and they described it. I
wonder if it was Atlantis.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is that potentially these sort of sightings, particularly in the middle of the ocean, would probably, over the years, probably have some sort of linking into the sightings of Atlantis, because Atlantis is supposed to appear and disappear. Yeah.
That's right. And the amount of different places they swear they have found Atlantis. In fact, we've got to do a show on that one day, because
we've done a show on the lost city of Atlantis. And we kind of decided it didn't exist. It's all myth and legend, written by I believe, if I remember rightly, it was Pliny
the Younger, Pliny the Younger,
someone like that. There you go.
I think they got Atlantis mixed up with the Minoans. I think that's where that came from. My own theory.
Way apart from each other. Anyway. Back to dimensions. So
exactly, portals. They could reach it.
Oh, or is that just teleportation? That's not jumping between parallel dimensions, is it? See, that's where I sit with if you believe the Philadelphia experiment was true, then that is just a teleportation. It's not. It's not jumping between dimensions. It's just transporting one thing to another thing in the same dimension.
It's
all to do with vibrations and that, but the Philadelphia experiment, I think,
when it comes to the Philadelphia experiment, the Philadelphia experiments existed in our time frame, but are reappeared at a certain point in the same timeline. So yeah, that's not. I wouldn't say it's come through like a portal, unless it went through a portal and then came back out of the portal.
The other side.
It was supposed to have turned up 22 miles away at another port, wasn't it?
Yeah, but that's teleportation. That's not parallel dimension.
No.
Well, can I tell you something about the Philadelphia experiment?
If you wish.
I tried my own Philadelphia experiment the other day, and what I did was I got some salmon and put it on bagels instead. And I tell you what, it's the best Philadelphia experiment I've ever done. It's awesome.
Ladies and gentlemen, he's here all week.
I'll be joining Kerry for the Madam Whiplash for the barbecue.
Exactly. Yeah. But no, I agree with what Kerry's saying. I don't think that unless there is because I can't actually remember off the top of my head. Did they actually have any contact with the people on the ship when it reappeared?
Which one are we talking about now? The other one or the
Philadelphia?
Philadelphia. No. The Philadelphia was basically meant to be a camouflage experiment. That's all it was.
Yeah.
And I think they inadvertently mucked up and turned it into, as you say, teleportation. It wasn't different dimensions. It was teleportation because it ended up 22 miles away. But that's when people were merged deck and everything like that. So no.
That's what I'm doing. That is just that, like you say, that's something going
There
wrong.
are some CIA files all about it, but you still can't read most of them. The only ones that you can see, that all of it's redacted pretty much.
But here you go, you make a story out of fragments.
Yeah.
So
unless
you
it's
could be
not
like, coming up with like 2 + 2 is like 500. Do you know what I mean? You're making a story up through fragments because you're never going to know the truth because the government won't let you.
That's the whole thing about conspiracy theories, particularly when it comes to documentation, where there is documentation that would give you the what actually happened, but it is redacted, so you are piecing together from what you can read, and as you say, 2 and 2 equals 500. But that's the whole thing about conspiracy theory, is you are coming up with a conspiracy theory to relate to the events that actually happen from the information you can find.
Exactly. We talked about this on the Lost Treasure show in relation to that as well, where you build a story up to follow the clues to find the treasure, but there may not be any treasure because what you're looking at is fragmented history.
Yeah.
Or fragmented myths and legends.
Talking of that, just my little thing here I want to pop in, because you know our show's not our show without us going off on a tangent. The money pit, do you reckon myths and legends and it's fruitless labour, or do you reckon there's something there?
A money pit?
Oak Island.
Oak Island.
Oh, no, I think that's pure TV. If there was anything of pure... If they really believed that there was that kind of treasure on there, they would not be allowed, archaeologically wise, to do some of the things they do for the TV, I believe. They've pretty much dug over that island and bore-rolled it and tractored it and God knows what else. Archaeologists wouldn't allow that if they really believed there was something there.
But the thing is with Oak Island, and I've spoken to somebody that's done a lot of research in Oak Island, even before the TV programme, because there has been this... Yeah, there's
been there going for ages.
Oak Island, because people have been treasure hunting on this island for decades.
Yeah.
And I know somebody who, funny enough, when I was in Salem, we were talking about Oak Island, and he's done a lot of research into it. And the problem you got with the money pit, because like Kerry says, they have gone over and over and dug out. They don't know where that is. That's the whole problem. They don't know whether they are digging in the right area. That's drilling right. Everything. They do have to jump through a lot of hoops to produce the program. Particularly with the Canadian government, they do have to have people, archaeologists there behind the camera to basically stop them doing anything wrong. That's why there are a number of places which you see on the show where they're not allowed to dig. They're only allowed to metal detect, and they're not allowed to dig.
It's in lots, isn't it?
Yeah, it's in lots, and they basically aren't allowed to dig. They're only allowed to go, I think, a couple of inches. And they're only allowed to use hand tools. They're not allowed to use machinery.
Well, as we all know, a couple of inches will get you everywhere.
Because it has significant history to it. So, a lot of it is for TV, but they do have to jump through a lot of hoops to get the correct permits to do what they're doing. But yes, because it's a TV program, I think people just jump to a conclusion. It's all made up, and they're just basically spinning a TV program. But I think the reason the program has been going on for so long is they don't have a clue where this thing is. They talk about the money, the money pit. They talk about 10x. They talk about this, that, and the other. And the reason they can't find it is because so many people have put searcher tunnels in. That's why they talk about searcher wood when they dig down.
That's right.
And pull it out. It depends.
I thought that just meant they were really happy to be searching.
So do you think then that there is no treasure? If people have been looking at it for this amount of time and they've still not found any, we are well off topic, I would like to say on this one. This has got nothing to do with parallel dimensions, but it just goes that there is nothing there.
Well, I think when it's all collapsed, it could be there.
I was going to say one day that whole island with the amount of holes and digging and tunnels and God knows what else, it's just going to go bleh in the middle like a pudding.
The problem you've got is some of the. It's a bit like when you look at the pyramids. What was kept in the pyramids was riches beyond belief, and over the years they've been slowly stolen, grave robbed, blah blah blah. But all of a sudden, over the years, they've suddenly found something. I.e., I've found a tomb that nobody knew about that had the gold sarcophagus, the headdress, and various different
rooms, isn't it? Hidden rooms
stuff like that inside of tombs that already existed. That they've basically made sure that they get to a certain room and they grave rob that, thinking that's the tomb, but actually there's a secret room going through that the actual real goods are in there. So they put dummies into full grave robbers, etc.
That's right.
With Oak Island, I think there is something there. Whether they'll ever find it, I don't know, because it's such a large island, and the techniques used back in the day probably were quite old school. So basically, just digging big holes and looking for it, covering them up when they've stopped, and then other people then go back and dig them up and finding all this sort of stuff there. But they are finding stuff on Oak Island, all stuff that shouldn't be there. There shouldn't be Roman coins.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
there shouldn't be crosses that date back to the Knights Templar from Europe when they've actually dated the particular cross.
That's right. Yeah,
they dated it back to a specific area in Europe where they can say where the lead was found, produced. So these sort of things shouldn't be then found.
If they are found there.
What happens if there's a portal there, there was a portal there, but it's now flooded because they put flood zones in? But
it's like
what happens if there's a portal?
For airports is basically what you're telling me there, because all of these things are from our history, our timeline. They're not from a different dimension, and then they literally plop there out of nowhere.
It could be like that film that you were trying to Land of the Lost with Will Ferrell. Could be a bit like that.
No, I just think over time people have visited there with these items and potentially have either dropped them, lost them, hidden them. Because at the end of the day, if they are finding stuff that is, say, because most of the tunnels go down more than 70 feet underground.
That's right, yeah.
100 feet underground. And they're pulling up stuff that is pre-searcher tunnels. When they say pre-searcher, that means they know how far from the records the other people went down. They've gone further, and then they're pulling out these elements.
That's right.
The gold chain, the stone tablet with words on it.
The runes on.
The runes on it. These are things that they're finding below searcher level. So how did they get there?
Well, they found the remains, the human remains, and those chains of the people that were put down there and then chained there and left there so that their souls would regard it.
The chains, they haven't found any chains. The chains have basically been gold-linked chains, etc. They believe that when they find the room that they will, where they found until they can actually get down there and drain it. They believe where they found the bone fragments from people from Europe at a particular age. What are they doing there? Because these predate when people actually should have actually discovered Canada. People coming from Europe at such an older age than when factual information say people actually discovered these places, and these are bones that relate to people that came from 100 years before those dates.
I actually think you three guys, Paul, Carl and Mark, should do a show on Oak Island, because I'm lost. I don't even think about this program. So can we go back to parallel dimensions, please?
Oh, go on then.
Talk about the Makawasi Stone Forest Cabin.
The Makawasi Stone Forest Cabin.
Oh, that's great.
I love it when you talk dirty to me. Right, here we are.
Dirty to me.
But the thing is, the name is Makawasi, but it's in Peru. So everybody thinks, aha, Japan! No, South America. Peru's Makawasi Stone Forest is often considered to be one of the most active gateways to other dimensions in South America. Even more active than the front door of certain drug barons. The beautiful, picturesque forest is known for having massive rock outcroppings that seem to have a humanoid shape to them, despite no known history of them being carved. Natives in the area have long considered the stone forest to be a sacred place, and not to mention one that's to be feared. Its reputation for having gateways to other dimensions comes from the fact that many mysterious disappearances have happened there over the centuries. One person came to a doctor's office after a particularly strange visit at Makawasi. The patient, a woman who was paralyzed throughout the half of her body, claimed to have seen a cabin while hiking with friends through the stone forest. Actually, I've heard of this before. The cabin itself seemed oddly designed and very, very out of place. The cabin had windows that glowed inside, and it was a stark contrast against the night sky. Peering inside, she noticed people in period costume laughing and cavorting, as if they were in a party. There were sounds coming from the cabin, almost beckoning her to go inside. So basically, being a nosy bugger, she felt an unnatural urge to go into the cabin and open the door. Soon a feeling of dread came over her friends, and they chased after her. She walked halfway through the threshold, i.e. the doorway, and was then pulled out by her friends. The half of her body that walked through the door became paralysed from that moment on. The patient has gone on record to say she believes she walked into another dimension, and that if she had gone through the doorway, she'd never have been seen again. The gateway of the gods. What do you make of that?
I think, again, I don't think this is a dimensional shift. I think this is just a time slip thing.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, sounds like a time slip.
For me, it just sounds like a time slip. So we're not actually coming up with anything that's cross-parallel.
The only parallel is
yours
potentially the first one we discussed, which was the Skinwalker Ranch. Most of these ones we're talking about, I agree with Kerry, from the facts, what they say and the way they describe it, potentially it could have been something that everybody describes everything as it looked out of place. There was people in various different costumes they didn't recognise. The sounds they didn't recognise. At the end of the day, if it was a time slip and it was, say, 200 years before, 200 years after, there's potentially that these people aren't going to know the costumes, aren't going to know that. I would say where they're saying, just from her what she said, she saw a strange cabin with glowing in the window. If it was Peru, middle of nowhere, does it actually say what year this was?
No.
So potentially, and I tell you what else it sounds like to me is an urban legend, because I've heard of stories like this in the UK where there was, you're stranded in the middle of the countryside and you go walking trying to find the nearest village, come across a lonely place, sounds of partying going on. I believe Raynham Hall is the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall, that's supposed to happen as well. People have turned up in the dead of night, thought there was a party going on and there wasn't, and when they knocked on the door there was no one there and stuff like that. But it sounds urban legend-y to me.
I have read this story before in a lot more depth, I can't remember what book it was, but it was exactly the same story. It wasn't South America, but to me, as you say, time slip. I think it's because if you've got like a wooden cabin there, sort of like 300-400 years ago, there's not going to be anything left of it now, is there? There won't even be any rot, So who's to say there wasn't a strange cabin with a bloody lantern in the window,
Or if it was a time slip, electricity.
No, it says they're in period costumes, sir.
Yeah, but you don't know how. She said strange period costume. She didn't say which period.
It could be either way. It could be future or it could be
past. It could have been like they've just walked in on the set of Jensen's. So they could be weird space outfits they're wearing.
We don't know, do we? No. But this is where it becomes, the definition becomes tricky, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When
you look at the different scenarios or the different cases we look at, a lot of them, when you break it down, you read it and you say, okay, that sounds interesting, blah blah blah. But then when you break it down and you break it down from what they say, like strange cabin, strange lights, period costume, strange noise, you can then put that down to, as we say, a time slip. Mm-hmm. So basically, you're looking at past or future.
Mm-hmm.
What about this one then? The article that appeared in Fate magazine in 1956. What about that one? Shall we talk about that one?
Mm-hmm.
In September 1956, an issue of Fate magazine, there was a curious story of a woman who apparently shifted into a parallel universe in 1934. And I've actually seen the clippings of this, and it apparently it really happened and it was really reported. So, according to the report, in the autumn of that year, a woman by the name of Miriam Golding had a very unusual experience while riding on an elevator with her fiancé in Chicago. The elevator was crowded, and when Miriam made a mistake and got off at the wrong floor, she found she could not push her way back in past the throng of people. So she resigned herself to, wait for this lift. And that was then she looked around and was started to realise that she was no longer in the store at all, but rather a massive train station. The enormous railway station she found herself in was allegedly bustling with loads of people and stuff, loads of travellers rushing to their trains and booming announcements of arrivals and departures echoing through the air. There seemed to be no way this busy place could have been any connection whatsoever to the music store she'd been in moments ago. The confused Miriam made her way to an information booth to ask where she was, but found that the woman working there completely ignored her. Didn't see her. Completely ignored her as if she wasn't there at all. Perplexed, Miriam followed a series of signs pointing the way to the street outside, and she emerged out into a mild, sunny afternoon that seemed to be in the midst of summer rather than autumn, and in a place that most certainly was not Chicago. She wandered around confused and noticed that everyone around her seemed to completely ignore her or walk on by as if they had not even seen her. I've got a theory about that again in a minute. At some point, she claims she saw a confused-looking boy standing in the sidewalk, similarly being passed on by people, who didn't see him or anything. So Miriam approached him and wondered what was going on. The boy could actually see her and respond to her and looked in her direction. As she approached, the boy seemed equally relieved that, he was able to see her and she could see him. And he said to her, "I guess they let you off at the wrong stop too." The two lost people walked together down the street in confusion, the whole time completely ignored by those around them. And the boy told Miriam what had happened to him. He claimed that he'd been playing tennis in Lincoln, Nebraska, in the US, and had gone to the locker room to change his shoes. When he had gone back to the courts to play some more, he found that tennis courts that had been there moments before were now gone, and in their place was a huge train terminal, which had basically turned out to be the exact same place into which Miriam had entered from the lift. They kept on walking until they reached an open area that led to water, and over the waves they could apparently make out a sandbar with several women on it, chatting and seeming to act as if nothing was beyond the ordinary. To their astonishment, one of the women was oddly her fiancé's sister. The women on the sandbar seemed to notice them and began waving and shouting to Miriam and her companion. They tried to swim out to the sandbar, but didn't seem as far, and he was confident they could reach it. Yet even though he was a good swimmer, it seemed that no matter how much he tried and pushed against the waves, he was unable to draw any further to the mysterious sandbar. And in the end, he returned back to shore, and it was in that second that the sandbar vanished into thin air. And it goes on and on and on, and basically they went back to the station, which looked like it... hang on, where are we? After some time of this odd feeling of hovering in darkness, she claimed that she suddenly opened her eyes to find herself sitting on top of a stool in the music store in Chicago that she was originally in. And it seemed to be in the process of closing down for the night. suggesting that she'd been there for at least several hours. Disorientated, Miriam looked around for her fiancé but couldn't find him and decided to head back to his home. When she arrived, her fiancé was very relieved and explained that he'd lost her in the store and had waited for her to come out to the right floor for a few hours before deciding to come home. And bizarrely, her fiancé's sister, who Miriam had apparently seen on a sandbar, claimed that she had seen Miriam in town and had even called out to her, but that she had been too absorbed in talking to a young boy to notice her. So basically, what happened? Where did she go? How did the sandbar appear? And how did people not see or hear her? Now, that's been brought up before in parallel dimension tales where people have walked through a portal, and because of the different vibrations that we all operate on, that's why people couldn't see or hear her. So what do you think?
When you break it down, yeah, but you could also break it down into the places where, as we've said on the other cases, it could be a time slip. But the more interesting being that is seeing somebody she recognised who was in a current time area that could see her. So potentially they were seeing another dimension that they were in. Does it ever say anything
merging together?
Did he say anything what happened to the kid, or?
Yeah.
Having
to me, it's almost like it. Right. Okay. So say there was two parallel dimensions. It seems like they overlapped for a time. Because
doesn't it? Yeah.
It seems more like an overlapping of a period of time, because she was walking around and not recognising it, and they weren't seeing her, yet she wasn't seeing the other dimension where her aunt or her niece or whatever it was had waved to her, and she hadn't seen it. So it seems like there's that. It's almost like a if it is parallels, then it looks like it's crossed over.
Well, that's what we were saying when we first started. Potentially, our timeline is straight, and all the other dimensions are wiggly stuff that at some point will connect with our timeline, and that's where people can cross over and come back in.
Well, but that seems to have overlaid for a little while, doesn't it? That does seem to have overlaid. So going back to Skinwalker Ranch, that seems to be a point or various points of overlaying at various times.
Well, that could be what they're talking about, the Skinwalker Ranch. It potentially could be multiple different dimensions all crossing, converging at the same spot.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with that. It's
but
like
nothing like that's been. There was that.
Chicago.
Oh, that was. Yeah,
but there's been no further reports of that. Something like that happening in that area.
I couldn't see any.
See, this is the problem with independent tales. They are just sort of tales, unless you've got it may have just happened at that one specific point in time, and she just happened to be that, or she come over ill, or she. I don't know. It's difficult on one witness. I use the term witness statement, sort of like individually, isn't it? It's hard to work it out, and then you have to. Do you believe or disbelieve just going on somebody's thing when we haven't actually at the time been able to monitor her for her mental or physical well-being, or, you know, if she could have had like a mini episode for all we know. Well, and that's what created that scenario for her.
There's been quite a few stories of...
The thing that's more interesting... Sorry, Mark, just quickly. The thing that I find more interesting about that case is that her relative or her fiance's sister saw her.
Yeah, waved to her, but she didn't acknowledge her. And she was talking to this small boy, which kind of verifies the fact that there was a small boy in there. But that if she's having a mental episode...
Yeah, but how did you... Yeah, but if she hadn't... You have to go back to the whole thing about how did they talk about the subject. If the sister-in-law brought up the little boy before she'd actually told anybody that she... So you've got as you've got to look at it. Say it was a criminal investigation, you'd have to set a timeline. So basically, you'd have to make sure people didn't talk to it and set it down. So unless that's been done, there is overlap. Potentially, she could have told her a brother, and a brother told her his sister, and they then pieced that together, saw it, and like you say, because she could have been just having an episode where she didn't realise where she was, and her sister just said, "Oh yeah, you were talking to a little boy," and then you jumped to conclusions.
Exactly, there could be a logical explanation. I mean, it could be an episode of dementia, or
you could say that most of the ones that we've discussed, there's possibly a logical explanation about it. But that's less fun, isn't it? If you're saying it's a logical explanation.
Sorry, my head goes, but why? Why? Well, what would be the logical explanation for that? Because there must be one. Because if it was what do I know? I don't know. I'm not a physics. I don't even know if it's possible. But then I'll believe in realms of people bumping into fairies in the woods and having a conversation with Pan, or the fairy queen or whatever. I'm quite happy to believe that.
Can I say something?
My brain can't accept this.
Can I say something?
No.
You shut your face. Right. What I was trying to say is, as certain ladies of the hedge witchery world know, there are places where the veil is thin.
True.
Why can't some of these places? Why can't somebody? And you should know that more than most of us.
Well, I
so
do,
why
but
can't?
I can believe it. I can believe
why
that, but I can't believe this.
Why? If you've got if it's a thin veil and there is a doorway there, but it's like, all right, when the old TVs, when you could tune them in, sometimes you could tune them in between two channels and you'd have a mixture of the two. Why can't you have that?
See, I kind of get the parallel dimension. It's the stories I have issues with, I think. I think that's more it, not the concept.
There's quite a few of those stories in America regarding parallel dimensions that I'd say merging together, doorways merging together.
Yeah,
I mean, we could go on and on and on.
The concept, I kind of get. I get the concept because, say, when I look at myths and legends, and we talk about gods and goddesses and fairies and the ether and elementals and stuff like that. That side of it, I totally get. But a woman walks into a department store and gets transported to a different dimension. I don't know. It just sounds a little bit bizarre.
Yeah, but it's also...
You talk to rocks.
Yeah, but the thing
you've got... shut up, every week. Shut up.
Shut up. You've got to remember, Kerry, is what you believe in, what you can do, is sound completely and utterly wacky-doodle to somebody that doesn't believe.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I get it.
Somebody will just go, you do what with rocks?
Yes, I know, right.
You do what
Quite a lot of people do that, actually. Yeah, that's a thing.
Fairy gardens and fairy rings, or this, that, and the other.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
But I've also got you the alien link as well, because there's a lot of other things that say, because it's the onion theory, if the dinosaurs evolved, they would be 6 foot tall, reptile humanoids.
So they shrunk then, these dinosaurs.
Well, yeah, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to do the flappy hand dance that Carr could do. You've got 6 foot tall humanoid reptilians wandering about under the surface of the earth in the little spaceships that come out and zap about, and people see them and go, aliens! And there you go, boom, back of the net.
And on that note, we've actually come to the end of the show, everybody.
And I had loads more to talk about. To be honest, you could do another show.
I know, easily, because you did go wild with research.
Well, I thought I did a good job. So
you did do a good job. I'm not saying you didn't. I'm just saying that there was a lot of research. So, on that note, what are we talking about next week, my beautiful men?
Christ knows.
We are going back to some of the topics that we missed when Mark was off and me and Carl just decided to have a waffle. So we are talking...
Oh, we're doing Anunnaki?
No, we're doing gin next week.
We're drinking gin.
Yeah. We're drinking gin and talking about the gin and genies and stuff like that next week.
Yeah,
Christina Aguilera be on that.
Different bottle of gin each, and we're going to drink it. Comes out of our mouths.
And we're going to be rubbing those empty bottles once we've drunk our gin to see if a little spirit will come out, and I will put money on it.
Oh, dear God, we all know about Kerry rubbing something till something comes out, but that's a totally different story.
If you miss any of our shows, do not forget you can go over to our YouTube channel. There are 2 channels over there. You have got Parasearch Radio and you have got Archive Parasearch. While you're over there, don't forget to click, like, share and subscribe. Yeah, and I'm doing this a lot this week. Because they missed out on the live, right? So, and I did normally do it on the live and I didn't do the live. So anyway, the other place to go is parasearch.org, where you can check out everybody's blogs that we have written, and there'll be new blogs coming very soon. On that note, my beautiful men, say good night.
Live long and prosperous. Good night.
A bientôt, bienvenue. Bye-bye.
Thank you for
Live long
listening.
and prosper,
Don't
my
forget
friend.
to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.